I am Gregory Hallows, and this is Preserve Halloween Podcast. So, we are going to do things a little different on today's podcast. I've been trying to, I guess, structure the podcast a little different. I mean, you guys know that if you listen often enough, that I ramble a lot. Um, a lot of the shows are just me rambling for 15, 20 minutes, and that's okay, but I really wanted to make sure that I structured the show differently and had some kind of semblance of organization and, you know, just made the show a little more structured, I guess. I mean, that's the easiest way to explain what my thought process is. So I've been working on something to do that, and I think I've finally gotten the uh, the template that I want. So I'm going to try that with this podcast starting today. I'm also going to finally have some form of a schedule. I think my goal is to have podcasts published every Sunday night and every Thursday morning. I think that's a doable structure, especially if this template works out the way I want it to. So let's try it. This first episode under this new structure is going to be all about Halloween decorations, the 1900s. Um, I wanted to make sure that I covered some of the discussions that people had sent to me. So this is one of them. Somebody wanted me to talk about vintage Halloween decorations, which I love, absolutely love. So welcome to this podcast. If you've never listened before, enjoy. If you have listened to every episode, thank you. This may be a little different for you, but it's probably not. I'm still going to ramble somewhat, but what we want to do today is dust off our crepe paper, light our lanterns, and we're going to travel back to the early 1900s and discover where Halloween decorations really began. Um, because at one point, there was a time when Halloween had no pumpkins, there was no paper skeletons, there was no porch full of spider webs. Decorations weren't a thing. So let's think about it. Halloween in America around the late 1800s, no spirit Halloween, there's no trick-or-treating, there's no pumpkin spice. Halloween wasn't really even celebrated here in America. Instead, there was autumn gatherings, there was pranks, there was ghost stories. These were all rooted in the folklore of the immigrants who came over to America, especially from Ireland and Scotland. And if, most of us know that Halloween's roots go back to Samhain, uh, not Samhain, like the Danzig band, but Samhain. This was the Celtic festival marking the end of the harvest season, and this was when the veil between worlds was, supposed to be the thinnest. People lit bonfires, they wore costumes to ward off spirits, carved scary faces into turnips, and they wanted to keep evil away. So this was not a decoration thing. This was practical a way to ward off evil. Um, Irish immigrants brought these traditions into America in the mid 1800s, and then uh, the country was, in the midst of this rapid industrialization, urbanization, cultural change, um, and slowly Halloween began to evolve from this night of, folklore and, kind of a different vibe to something more festive and decorative and commercial. So, to really understand the rise of Halloween and Halloween decorations and, all of the things associated with that, you need to talk about the Victorians and the Victorian age. The late 19th century, obsessed with spiritualism and the afterlife. Mourning culture was everywhere, and not like mourning, Mourning. This is mourning, Mourning. Mourning culture was everywhere. Black clothing, post-mortem photography, seances. This was all common in middle and upper class homes. Um, and I don't know if you've seen, you could research this, but there was a lot of people who did pictures with the dead. That was very common. Um, Ghost stories were a form of entertainment, and death was discussed often as just a topic of conversation. This dark fascination set the stage for Halloween to become more than just a night of tricks. It became a theme. You could have a Halloween themed occasion. Parties started coming up with decorations made by hand. People would cut out ghosts out of paper, handmade lanterns, eerie silhouettes. Wealthier families would go out. They would transform an entire parlor into spooky salons for the night, and that caught on very, very quickly. So here's what happens. Denison Manufacturing Company comes along. In 1909, Denison, which was originally a crepe paper and label manufacturer, they released their very first bogey book. Now, I've seen a reproduction of one of these beautiful books. I love the bogey books. They're really cool. And it's a nostalgia thing for me and just history. But these bogey books were Halloween party planning guides filled with ideas for costumes, food, games, but most importantly, decorations. The bogey book were whimsical, spooky, very deeply influential. These encouraged Americans, especially middle-class women, to throw Halloween parties with these elaborate themes. Black cats, witches, harvest moons, pumpkins, owls, all the traditional vintage Halloween things. And these books taught readers how to make their own crepe paper garlands, hanging ghosts, table settings, taught them how to make all this stuff, DIY, big time. But here's the smart thing. Denison did not just stop at making instructions. They sold these supplies as well. So much like 80s cartoons, which were 30-minute long commercials for toys, and just, to sell more toys, but that became iconic, He-Man, Transformers, all that stuff. Those were just long commercials for toys. Denison's Bogey books were really just a catalog for you to buy stuff from them. And then along came Beazle, which I still, to this day, don't know if I'm saying that right. Beistle. I say it Beazle. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but somebody let me know. Beazle came around. They joined the scene around the same time, and they created die-cut paper decorations, fold-out tissue pumpkins, skeletons, owls, witches, all in the beautiful, beautiful, bold orange and black. These were inexpensive, and they were disposable, and that's the thing. I've talked about this before. I love the fact, and it's a miracle, that any of these decorations from back then are still even exist because they were not made to keep. They were made to use and throw away and hopefully buy another one the next season. They were not meant to put away and cherish and save for hundreds of years, but that's probably why they're so valuable. But anyway, back then, suddenly it was possible to turn your entire home into a haunted haven for Halloween, and that's what a lot of people did. So by the 20s and 30s, Halloween was no longer just an old world ritual. Now it was a community event. Now cities and towns, especially in the Midwest and Northeast, they hosted parades, they hosted dances, block parties, schools, churches, women's club. They all used Halloween as a theme for a safe and fun entertainment, especially for kids. Now, why? A lot of us know why. Halloween pranks were getting absolutely out of hand. Kids would tip over outhouses, they'd steal things, they'd start fires. So community leaders wanted to rebrand Halloween with these costumes and games and plenty of decorations. So they wanted to keep these kids busy so they wouldn't cause mayhem. Now, if you want to see a very, very, very good representation of the mayhem of Halloween in the early days, go watch Meet Me in St. Louis. I recommend this movie probably every year because it has one of the best scenes of just chaos on Halloween. Check that out and let me know what you think. Newspapers were encouraging readers to decorate in the Halloween spirit. Stores began stocking paper cutouts, plastic lanterns, party favors weeks ahead of time. So it wasn't just, buy this stuff the week of Halloween or the day of Halloween. They started to anticipate this and put out stuff. Now, back then, I don't believe they considered July 5th to be the start of Halloween, but you get the picture. I have some old catalogs for some of these products from the early 1900s, and they're just, man, it's so fun to look at those. Um, Front porches started to be draped in orange and black. Pumpkins with grinning faces began showing up as centerpieces. Schools would hang paper bats and made tissue ghosts, and schools would decorate. This was becoming the perfect marriage of community tradition and a growing consumer culture. So, of course, it's America. We're going to capitalize on making this something that people buy, right? So those designs that originate back in the early 1900s, so many of them are still around. The grinning jack-o'-lantern with the triangle eyes, that was the early 1900s, and that's still an icon. That's still one of the most popular designs. The black cat with the arched up back, who's hissing, I guess. It's the irritated cat. Those were inspired by superstitions, right? But Dennison and Beazle made those famous, and those are still iconic. I have a few of the original cutouts hanging framed in my office. The witch that was flying across the moon, and the spooky owls and dancing skeletons. All that stuff comes from this early commercialization of Halloween, and collectors now are looking for those vintage items at estate sales, auctions, online. Um, some of those original bogey books go for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to collectors because they were not meant to exist beyond that season. They were supposed to be bought and then used and thrown away. So the fact that any of that exists is a miracle, right? So how does that influence modern the modern times, and also what's the legacy? So yes, of course, Halloween decorations nowadays are super elaborate. You got animatronic everything. You got the 12-foot skeletons, but those early inspirations and that spirit of early Halloween decor still lives on now. I don't think vintage Halloween aesthetics ever gonna go out of style because it's so iconic. It's so like that stuff is so good. Um, there's a lot of artists and small businesses that are taking inspiration from those Beazle and Dennison designs. Uh, you can see social media has tons of people that will show how to decorate in the retro Halloween themes. Orange paper streamers, glass jack-o'-lanterns, crepe paper garlands, basically copying what our ancestors did way back when, over 100 years ago. The reason why does people do anything is for the nostalgia. It's for the charm. It's, the decorations back then were a mixture of creepy, but also just fun. I think that's what made those early decorations so iconic is they weren't trying to scare you. It was all about having fun. And I think that's why they'll never go out of style. There's a lot more technology now, and that's gonna keep, being evolving, more technology. What are we gonna have a 20-foot skeleton at some point? But for me, I don't think you can beat that early there's just you can look at a vintage Halloween decoration and just know it's like one of the original like designs and early like all that early stuff is so good. Um, so the next time you hang up a skeleton on your door or you light a pumpkin on the porch, you're basically taking part in a tradition that's over a century old. Um, a tradition that's rooted in ghosts, parties, crepe paper, or creepy paper, like they say on What We Do in the Shadows. Like, I mean, that creepy paper, right? Um, and a whole lot of imagination. And that's another thing that makes Halloween so fun is you get to use a lot of your imagination. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoy this new format that I'm trying. I have a whole like years worth of ideas that I'm trying to properly format and write down and make these podcasts more fun for you. Um, so if you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review or share it with your favorite people who love Halloween. Send me I can't remember what it's called on my podcast page where you could send me like a mail or a note or something and just kind of let me know what you want me to research. Um, I love sharing my love of Halloween with you, and I love, you know, trying to encourage people to preserve Halloween. I think one of the upcoming podcast episodes will be how trick-or-treating turned from, a vandalism prevention device into creating pretty much candy empires, Um, that's trick-or-treating was a huge part and reason for a lot of candy companies becoming humongous. I don't think candy corn would exist. Do you? If it wasn't for trick-or-treating, who knows? I call it devil's earwax, but a lot of people love candy corn. But would it exist without Halloween and trick-or-treating? I doubt it. But yeah, so until next time, thank you guys for listening, and always, always, always preserve Halloween.